Hi, welcome to Hedgehog Hollow here, LDRS Creative. I'm really excited to be showing you all about the new hybrid inks that LDRS are bringing out. So I have a selection of them here. My nail polish even matches some of them. And I want to talk to you as to why hybrid inks are my favourite type of ink to work with. If you've watched Hedgehog Hollow videos before, you know I'm a big fan of hybrid inks. And they also have a couple of other different pads coming out, but I'm going to show you the difference between a hybrid ink pad, a solvent ink pad, a dye ink pad, and also a pigment ink pad, and why I recommend hybrids. So you can see here we've got a beautiful mix of colours, and I'll be going through some of those in a minute. And the other thing I should mention, so these are all brand new. So they're literally just launched at Creativation and they're now available to buy on the LDRS website. And I'll have all the links in the description below for you as well. Plus, if you subscribe to the Hedgehog Hollow box, then you'll be getting a sampling of these hybrid inks in your box this month. We have an exclusive 1-inch cube version of some of these hybrid inks in a collection we've called Tea Party, which will be coordinating with some of the other items I'm actually using in today's video. But we have dark colours, we have light colours, beautiful pastels. So I'm just going to start to move these off to the side. Now, if you've never worked with hybrid ink before, or if you're new to crafting, there's lots of different types of ink pads out there. So I have grabbed a selection from my stash, and I'm going to take you through some of the differences and why hybrid ink makes your crafting life so much easier. So I'm going to stick with the hybrid black for now. There are beautiful colours like this bright blue, and there's pinks, there's greens, there's purples. There's a real spectrum of colours. And I've also, as I say, grabbed these other inks from my stash. Now, I haven't included distress inks and distress oxides because they're a little bit different again. So distress ink, just to summarise, is a dye-based ink. It will work in the same way as the dye inks that I'm showing you here. And the only difference is it very much reacts with water and gives you that distress feel. The distress oxides, again, are something a bit different. They're a hybrid between a dye and a pigment, so it's a fusion ink. And I have got lots of videos on distress oxides, and I will pop some up in this corner if you want to see exactly what distress oxides are all about. But these are the basic types of inks you will see when you go to a craft store or your local scrapbook store or stamping store. So the most common type of ink is a dye ink. It's a water-based ink. I'm going to stamp one out for you. This is the scrapbook.com, and I've got this beautiful little Mini Winnie. She's an exclusive, again, to the Hedgehog Hollow box. If you're a Mini Winnie fan, it's Mini Winnie and her puppy, and it has lots of accessories. It's a stamp and die set. So if you stamp out with dye ink, it's going to dry pretty quickly. The dye ink will soak into your cardstock. So I'm just working on some regular cardstock here. I chose a Bristol Smooth because I want to be able to throw lots of things at it. Just due to time on a video, I'm going to heat dry. You do not need to heat set dye inks. They dry pretty quickly, but I want to make sure mine's fully dry. Now, the general rule of thumb when you're working with inks is opposites. So if you use a dye ink, you can use an alcohol or a solvent-based colouring medium. If you use a solvent ink, you can use a water-based colouring medium. If you use the same, so a dye, which is a water-based ink with water-based, say, watercolours or water-based pens, it's going to run because it's going to reactivate itself. Same applies if you're using something like Copics. You couldn't use a solvent-based ink because it's going to reactivate. Now, I'm going to colour over the lines just to show you that they do not smudge. So if I'm using a solvent marker, like an alcohol marker, which is my Copic, I can use it with a dye-based ink and it isn't going to run at all. Whereas if I took my water brush here and I start going over my puppy, that pink ink is running. Not as much because I've heat dried it, but I definitely have a pink hue to my little doggy here. So if you wanted to use water-based, we'd want to go with a solvent-based ink. So you could go with something like a StazOn ink. There's lots of different other things out there. You could use an archival ink. The only downsides with those types of inks are that they're very difficult to clean off your stamps, and I'm not a big fan of StazOn. It's great because it dries on things like acetate and porous surfaces. You definitely would want to get the StazOn cleaner. I'm just going to use my stamp chamois, but because we're going to be working with a few different ones here. But in general, you'll want to invest in that StazOn cleaner. It comes with a little foam applicator on the top, and you just rub that over your stamp and then clean with your chamois or with some kitchen towel. So if you stamp with StazOn or a solvent base, it will dry on acetate, it will dry on glass, it will dry on anything porous, as well as it's great for watercolouring. So if I now take this water brush and I go over that solvent-based marker, it's not budging at all. Whereas if I take my nice Copics, you can see I've got that smudgy mess already. I'm just going to scribble that little bit of black out of my Copic there. So this is why we use dye for Copics and we use solvent for water-based. And what I will do is I'm just going to write them on here so you can refer to them. So this is my solvent and this is my dye. So they're the two most common inks that you get in your craft room. Now you also have pigment inks. So there's lots of different pigment inks on the market. Particularly white pads tend to be pigment based. Pigment is not going to soak into your paper as quickly as dye. So you saw the dye dried really quickly. If I have a pigment ink, it doesn't do that. It's going to sit on the top of your surface. So again, just ink up your stamp, put it down. Now, if I was to touch it, actually I will, you can see it smudges. That's because it takes much, much longer to dry than a dye-based pad or a solvent-based pad. So pigment inks are great because I could throw some embossing powder down on here, clear embossing powder, white embossing powder. They stay wet long enough and sit on the top of your surface that you can use them as an embossing ink, which is really nice because if you stamp with a pink pigment pad, you can put some clear embossing powder over it and it looks like you've got pink embossing powder or blue or purple, any of those really fun colours, whereas lots of us don't have all those different colours of embossing powder. So pigment ink is perfect for that. It's also great, you can just heat dry it. You do not have to put things on top. You could leave it to dry. I would then leave it a good hour probably to really make sure it's thoroughly dry, or just use one of your heat tools. This is the Ranger heated tool. You could use your embossing tool as well. So once you've heat dried it, you can then pretty much use anything. So I could go in with my Copics and colour in, and it's going to be fine. So I can colour in my little doggy here. Or I could even take my water and it's not smudging. So pigment is great. I love the fact that it's very embossable, but you always have to think about what you're doing. The VersaFine particularly, I'm very tentative with Copics and things because it does have a solvent element to it. So if I'm going to use Copics, typically I'd either heat dry it or, even better, put some embossing powder over the top. However, there is an ink available that means you don't have to worry about any of these things. So I'm just going to put pigment on here. Just if you want to take screenshots and refer back to them, then you're welcome to do that. So the reason that LDRS went with hybrid is because all of these rules don't apply. Hybrid ink is exactly what it says. It's a hybrid dye pigment ink. So you can use your watercolors with it. You can use your Copic markers with it. You can use any colouring medium you like. You can use mists, you can use things like your Spectrum Noirs, you can use your Zig markers, you can use your alcohol markers. I'm just kind of looking around my room. You can use watercolours, you can use all sorts of things on it. And this is a really nice, crisp hybrid ink. So let me stamp this out, like so. So you can see there, I've got all those beautiful fine lines of my doggy. It will take a little bit longer to dry than dye, but not as long as pigment. Again, you can help that process along by just using your heat tool, which is what I'm going to do here. Now, the LDRS hybrid, normally you can't emboss on top of a hybrid ink. However, I've been playing around with these LDRS ones. They're really high quality ink, and if you work quickly, as in you have your embossing powder, which they have also just launched in the white and the clear, and you tip it on straight away, you can emboss with these. So that's a really nice feature. You've got everything in a dye ink, everything in a solvent ink, and everything in a pigment ink, all in these LDRS hybrid pads. So again, I can colour, oh, I've got black still on my Copic. But you can colour your doggy. He's going to be fine. You can grab that aqua painter. It's not going to run. So whatever you want to colour these in with, you can go for it with a hybrid ink. So none of those regular rules that I had on the screen before are going to apply with a hybrid ink. Hybrid takes all the guesswork out. So whether you're a beginner stamper, you don't have to worry about pigment, dye, solvent inks and which ones do you use when. Hybrid is a great way to go. If you're an established stamper but you like to kind of pair in maybe some Copics but you want to add some watercolor details, or you want to add that shimmer with your Spectra Noirs or your Nouveaux, then you can absolutely do that with a hybrid ink. So whatever your skill level, I really would recommend hybrid inks. And while I'm here, I also wanted to show you a couple of other inks that LDRS have as well. So I mentioned that they have these two embossing powders that they're adding to their collection. There's a white and a clear embossing powder. But they are also doing two pads that I really wanted to draw your attention to. One is the Watermark pad. So this is very much like your Watermark, your Clearmark pad from Nouveau, your Wow glue pad. So this is a glue pad, so you can emboss with it. It's got a nice soft foam. It's not too hard, it's not too soft. I very much prefer it to my Watermark. I would say it's on par with some of the best Watermark pads I've used. So you can use that with your embossing powders. You can also use it on coloured cardstocks. So if I have a black piece here, or maybe you have a yellow, or I have some great craft cardstock actually just to the side here. So this is my crafty coloured cardstock. I'm just going to see how much, there's not much black left on my pad. So if I stamp it on here, you can see I have the watermark of the doggy. So I could put my embossing powder over and emboss it how I normally would, or you can use other stamps or the same stamp to create a beautiful background. So I could keep going, and I can then, you can see here, produce a lovely doggy background that I could put my dog that I've coloured in over the top. So that's definitely a fantastic use of something that you can do. Of course, you can add your embossing inks to it, and it works with any embossing powders, but they do have that lovely fine white and the clear as well. It's a great clear ink as well. You can see all that fairy detail in my doggy. You can see all of that in there. So some of those thicker ones, particularly I find with Watermark, you lose some of those finer details. So the other pad I wanted to talk to you about is the white. So white pads are something really difficult, I think, to get right. I have a Hero Arts Unicorn, I have the Scrapbook.com whites. They are all great, but they are a pigment ink. I've never found a hybrid ink, and it's a little bit harder to see if I put this lid on the black, you can see there. So it says LDRS Creative Hybrid Ink, but it's in white. Now, what that means is we can use it on darker cardstocks. Now, ideally, I probably would suggest cleaning your stamp a little bit better than I did, but when I stamp it down on my black cardstock, you can see I've got that gorgeous white image. If I did that with a dye ink, and let's do one so that I can demonstrate it to you. If you get this on here, ink is a suspended medium. Take a kitchen towel, wipe it across, you will find it will almost re-ink itself in a way, or if you've got the re-inkers, of course you can do that too. I'm just going to wipe off my stamp here. And so if I did a dye ink on dark cardstock, it soaks right in instantly, because dye ink, the way it dries is by absorbing into the fibres in that paper. Pigment ink Again, it will sit on top like this hybrid, but you're going to need to heat dry it quite intensely on dark cardstocks particularly, or add embossing powder to it. This is the only ink I have in my whole stash, and I have lots of them, I can assure you, that you can use. It's a hybrid, so we can still use all of those different mediums to colour with, but it's going to give you that detailed, beautiful image without having to do anything else with it as well. So that's a little bit of an overview on hybrid pads and why I think they changed our crafting. So I will also just bring these in. You're welcome, of course, to pin, share, save, screen print, anything you like with these. I'll write on this one too. This is the Watermark. And I don't know if this is going to show up. Yes, it will. So that again is our hybrid white. And again, here they've got the hybrid and the pigment. So of course I will put all the links to all of these beautiful LDRS pads below. I'll also put the clear mark and the embossing powders down there. If you're part of the Hedgehog Hollow Box Club, then of course you'll be getting a sampling of these and possibly even some embossing powders if you're a regular subscriber. So watch out for those too. And then if you're not already a Box Club subscriber, we do have a few boxes left. I'll pop a link below for those as well. And you will also get that exclusive Mini Winnie with Puppy. We have 2 exclusive paper packs in there, and of course these wonderful hybrid inks. If you've got any questions at all on hybrid inks or inks in general, do pop those in the comments. We love hearing from you, and I hope you found this video useful. If so, do give us a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button or stamp it if you prefer, and I'll see you again very soon at Hedgehog Hollow. Happy stamping, everyone. Bye.